Good evening. Welcome to the Troy City Council Special Study Session for February 25th, 2019. I will call that meeting to order. The roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick? Here. Councilmember Pennington?
Here. All present. We have one discussion item this evening. C1 is the results of the Green Space Subcommittee. So at this point, I will turn the meeting over to City Manager Miller, who will start us off, I assume, and make some introductions. Good evening, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor, rest of Council. Just like to note that the Troy Parks and Recreation Advisory Board created a Green Space Subcommittee, and Tim McGee is the leader of that group. And Kurt Bovenseep is the city's liaison to the committee, at least from March of last year. Also would like to remind you and the public that the report is on the city's website. We're at the Green Space location. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kurt Bovenseep, who will start out.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to do a short little introduction, and then Mr. McGee is going to take the majority of the presentation over. So just a real brief timeline. On December 5th of 2017 is when Council gave staff the direction to go to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee to suggest forming the Green Space Subcommittee. And consequently, on January 11, 2018, the subcommittee was formed with Mr. McGee being the chair of that committee. Mr. McGee is part of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. Council gave this committee specific goals, and that was to define open and green space, analyze the current inventory in the city of Troy, research neighboring cities' parks and recreation policies, and analyze current ordinances and policies concerning green and open space. And then with those results, make any recommendations based on their findings. The subcommittee's first meeting was February 1st, and as City Manager Miller noted, that I was originally not the liaison until March. However, I was present at those meetings, and I quickly recognized how eager our citizens were to be involved with this task. It started with a very large group with a lot of great ideas on how to first define open and green space. As the committee continued, the group kind of shrunk a little bit as assignments were disseminated, and we resulted with the list that you see here where I want to note that these are not all the contributing members of the subcommittee, but these were the last of the people that were involved and contributed in the report. There was a lot more that aren't noted here that were involved and contributed in different ways. I've been involved with a lot of committees over my career, almost 20 years at the City of Troy, and I'd like to say that this committee by far was the most enthusiastic for this assignment and put a lot of work as detailed in the 25-page report that was given to you last week. Very detailed, very thorough, and I'm sure they'll have stories to tell how they went out and got the information that's going to be presented tonight. So at this time, I'll pass it over to Mr. McGee, and he can explain the process.
Thank you, Kurt, Mayor, Council. First of all, I want to appreciate the opportunity to head this up. Parks and Recreation has always been a soft spot in me in my life. My grandfather and his brother actually set up the whole park system for Omaha, Nebraska back at the turn of the century, back in the 1900s, so it's always been kind of in our bailiwick. After the February 1st meeting, we met on February 15th, and we started to set up subcommittees. And that's when we actually got down to a working group that could actually handle this thing. I'll let you know that even though this was February 15th of 2018, we actually completed the study in 5 months. And due to circumstances beyond our control and out of our control, we're here tonight instead of way back in August when we had hoped to give this to you. But even though there's been that time lag, there's nothing really much substantially has changed from our recommendations and our studies. Slide 3, yeah, we started with a definition of what open space and green space was, and I knew that the council tackled this and couldn't come up with it. And after reviewing neighboring cities' policies And speaking directly to many of their representatives, it became apparent that we should not confuse open or green space semantics, but to simply consider it all open and green to be one entity. Thus, our working definition was that open green space is an open piece of land that is available to Troy residents for both active and passive recreational use, and may or may not be owned by the City of Troy. This space includes the following: city-owned developed parks, undeveloped pocket parks, community gardens, cemeteries, the dog park, 2 golf courses, the nature center, the historic village, the civic center, and the community center. Also, the Troy School District owned land, various schoolyards, and any undeveloped land, other school district locations within the city that were not inventoried, and private ownership, both developed and undeveloped land within the city that may be accessible by permission to Troy citizens. Basically, our inventory took place. These people actually went out and physically walked the spaces throughout the whole city of Troy, took pictures in the snow and in the ice. We found out that the city actually owns 1,106.63 acres of land. The Troy School District owns 621.5 acres. And I want to preface that this did not include the building. These are outside the buildings, so it would be open space. Private ownership was 709.5 acres. This only includes what limited acreage we have identified as noted below in the review of the Troy Open Green Space Inventory. Minimally, the total available acreage of open green space as defined by our definition is 2,438 acres, or 11.33% of the total acreage of the city. This compares favorably with the National Recreation and Park Association guidelines of 10 acres of park and open space per 1,000 population within each city, plus an equal area in parkways, large parks, forests, and the like, either within or adjacent to the city. Next on our agenda was to research current Troy ordinances, planning, policies, and past task force reports concerning open green space. Current zoning ordinances that we looked at were sections 10.03, 10.04, and 13.07. In those zoning ordinances, it defines open space and open space common. It is interesting to note that the definitions as noted in Article 2 of the current zoning ordinance doesn't differ much from our working definition of open green space. We also looked at the open preservation options in those zoning conferences, specific requirements that provides protection of open space. We looked at the cluster option zoning, which is open space requirements, the irrevocable conveyances. We also looked at the woodland protection for tree preservation methods. We looked at the planned unit PUDs, typically negotiated open space amenities, and we looked at the landscaping requirements, specific requirements for commercial development. We then looked at the 2003 master plan for 5 new parks. They encourage preservation of existing features and improves the recreational opportunities. We then went to 2007-2012 Parks and Recreation Plan, where it provided park classification system and provides citizen survey information. We then looked at the 2015-2020 Parks and Recreation Plan, where it recognized the changing demographics for the city of Troy. It recognizes private property and unconventional areas as open green space and provides specific goals within that plan. The 2004 Troy City Center Priority Task Force was reviewed, which encourages a place to gather, a pleasant and comfortable place, provides connection to other facilities and amenities. And then finally, we looked at the Troy Futures 2020 report, where it emphasized villaging development concept. It encouraged pathways. It encouraged LEED certification, improves stormwater management, preserves open spaces, woodlands, and wetlands, encourages alternative fuel distribution, and suggests creating an environmental environmental advisory supporting community partners. After we did this together, we finally sat down and figured out what our recommendations are. Our detailed report, which you all have, lists many items that we classified as our wish list. However, we prioritized 3 recommendations. 1, promote a 30-year dedicated millage not to exceed .05 for future park open green space enhancement, maintenance, and/or acquisition in lieu of renewal of proposal A, B, and C bonds. 2, implement the proposed pathway plan in its entirety as it was originally approved. The interconnected pathways throughout the city must serve access to specific destinations within the city and be able to link with our surrounding city neighbors. The pathways must be accessible to all to accommodate walking, biking, and rest areas. And 3, develop Sylvan Lake as the premier park of the city with recreational activities such as fishing, swimming, ice skating, picnicking, etc. This is an area within the city that has been neglected. Additionally, from the outset of our meetings, we decided to not address the issue of the development of the Troy Civic Center, the exception being Huber Park, that is part of the city's park planning. However, it became readily apparent to us that some mention and consideration must be addressed. Thus, we recommend that development of the Troy Civic Center should be considered as an extension of the city parks and recreation future planning. Whereas we found that the city, in partnership with the school district and private ownership, currently has sufficient open green space, the development of the Civic Center has the opportunity to add a tremendous asset to the Troy residents. The proposed development will provide many advantages for the residents with opportunities for sport and recreation, preservation of the natural environment, stormwater management, in addition to exhibiting a village concept to city planning. As with all of our city parks, the proposed development would add to our development of parks and open spaces that include protected natural lands, ecological reserves, wetlands, and other green areas is critical to providing healthy habitats for its citizenry, the wildlife, and the plants. In summation, open green space provides many advantages for the residents with opportunities for sport and recreation, preservation of the natural environment, stormwater management, and thus must be a key consideration for the future planning and health of the city. When we maintain and improve our parks and rivers, provide safe recreational activities for sport and bicycling, and offer safe walking venues, then the health of the city and its citizenry will improve. Furthermore, future planning of existing space must be given to develop a network of parks and open spaces that include protected natural lands, ecological reserves, wetlands, and other green areas is critical to providing healthy habitats for all, the wildlife and the plants. Natural landscapes are vital to preserving regional ecosystems. Planning must be concerned with the proximity of these areas for our citizens so they can be enjoyed within a short walking distance of their homes or place of business. Managing open and green space is more than just cutting the grass and picking up the garbage. We need to think of these spaces as outdoor community centers. The director of the Detroit Riverfront Conservancy summed up their vision for the city of Detroit. All great cities have places where people can meet and play. Troy's vision can also plan to be a great city. That's it. There's a lot of development in the attachments that you all have. And I, along with some of my committee members are here, are open for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Tim. On behalf of the council, I just want to say thank you to you for chairing this important subcommittee, and thanks to everyone that participated in the subcommittee and this report. So we are indebted to you for doing our work. So we thank you we thank you for doing that. City Manager Miller, is there anything that you wanted to say on behalf of the staff before we have a conversation?
Well, I would like to thank both the committee and our staff for doing a great job.
Yes, most definitely.
And then turn it over to council for questions or comments.
Is there something that staff was looking from council today regarding this?
Just general direction, not specific. There is a slight tie between some of the recommendations and the strategies which we worked on last week, which we're going to further develop and send to council to approve.
We had a short conversation about the expiration dates of the bonds. Did you happen to?
Yes, I did look it up, 2021.
2021,
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And that's all three bonds?
Correct, A, B, and C.
This is an opportunity for council to start the conversation. Councilmember Abraham.
Thanks, Mayor. So, Tim, I appreciate, first of all, the very thorough report. It really puts together everything well. There's a lot of information from a lot of different sources, and that's no small task. And to do it concisely and thoroughly is no small task. My question is about the first recommendation. Could you give a little background into how .05 millage was selected and 30 years as the time frame? Can you give a little context for that?
Oh, we hemmed and hawed.
That might be part of the answer.
It started out much higher, and we decided, well, that's not probably a saleable point to the voting population within the city. And with input from the staff, we pretty much figured out what we should put aside. You do realize that many years ago, City Council had set aside money for acquisition, and that has now expired. That's all done. So pretty much we used that as a base point and came up with the .05. We know how difficult it was to get through a library millage. And we felt that a .05, if it was presented properly, and at the same time it's replacing some bond issues that are out there right now, that it could be, it's a saleable item.
Just one quick follow-up question. And this is more for staff. So for an average household, what would .05 millage be on a yearly basis? It's pretty nominal.
I don't want to guess unless Mr. Darling knows.
Give me a minute and I figure that out. Just approximately, that was my question.
$8 a person per year.
Yes,
Not that
I was
much.
figuring about $5 to $10.
Right.
1 or 2 Starbucks.
Per year.
Free.
Per resident? Per resident.
Per resident.
So household income.
Which translates to what per
$250.
year?
About
$250K.
$10 a year.
Well, no, total. When I look at it,
$250K per
Yes.
year.
Thank you.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Or 1 acre.
At today's prevailing prices.
Right.
Councilwoman Holder.
Thank
But-
you, Mayor.
But
So-
can I just expand on it? What's more important, it's just not necessarily the acquisition. There's very few land parcels that are really out there for acquisition right now. It's really for maintaining and keeping things going. We felt, and you'll find it in here, that you've already made some adjustments, like the park on Beach Road between Waddles and Long Lake. You've put in restroom facilities there. One of the arguments that I've always heard from citizens, well, I go to the park, but what happens if my kids have to go to the bathroom, or I have to go to the bathroom? And that's part of that whole plan, is to put that up so we can maintain that and add that to all the parks. Actually, the city of Birmingham, as an example, is using a guideline of a quarter mile. You should be able to walk from your house a quarter mile to a park. I don't think they'll ever reach that, but that's a guideline that we're trying to, you want to be able to get someplace within a bike ride? Sure. Yeah.
I think it was in this report, but for the sake of the discussion, everybody in the room, the number of parks we already have in the city is 20, what is it, 20?
16.
16.
16,
I believe 16 total
Developed.
developed parks.
plus, we have other properties not developed, right?
Total of 11 vacant parcels of what we call, they're part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan of undeveloped parks.
So the millage that you're talking about, that, you know, we've had it as a priority in our budget, the trails and pathways, which the whole intention is to connect the parks, is really a green effort, right, to connect them. Would this be in addition to what we have set aside in capital to pursue that priority of our residents? Would this millage be on top of that?
Well, it's
addition
it's
to-
additional revenue, but obviously, city council, you have
We can,
the power to do what you want.
okay.
Any other comment? Councilman Hamilton?
Yeah, my thoughts are, right now, obviously, housing prices are higher, most likely. Our budget is looking good, and I know now to acquire property is a little more expensive than during a recession, but when I thought about it, during a recession, our revenue goes down anyway. So it seems like either way, we're not really going to get around the cost of whatever acquiring land was, though it seems like from the study that acquiring land isn't the first priority, which I understand, and it's good to get this research and compare it to other communities to understand that. So where do you imagine that 250, where would you, if you controlled that 250K per year, or the board, where would you see that going? Any examples of direct things? I know you said adding facilities to the existing parks, but is there?
Developing the undeveloped parks that are just sitting there today.
Okay.
In fact, some of those are referred to as what's called a pocket park.
Mm-hmm.
Very little land. But we envision, and it's in here, about a community partnership with the people that live in around that park to be actively involved in how that park is maintained and put together. So that's where that money would go to.
I see. It's fantastic.
Councilman Pennington?
These pocket parks, approximately how many acres are they?
They change. By definition, a pocket park means it's just very little. To give you an example, Square Lake in Livernois, when we took the parsonage and the church out of there, that is that's a pocket park. It's just sitting there doing nothing that we own. But that's part of the Parks and Recreation overall plan of the parks.
Is that like 2-3 acres? That's smaller than that?
I think it's smaller than that, isn't it?
Yeah, that particular parcel, is smaller than that, but the total acreage for undeveloped parks, so those 11 parcels total 61.5 acres.
So some of them are on the larger side then?
Correct. Yeah, some of them are upwards of over 10 acres.
Generally, under the bonds A, B, and C, where we purchase property, we were buying larger pieces, but we did also, some smaller pieces of property came up, like on Rochester Road and Square Lake Road, which aren't large, because really, going back historically, our Parks and Recreation planning was not to go for pocket parks, it was to go for larger ones. But that changed as opportunities came up and individual pieces were available in the city purchased.
What did we purchase at Rochester Square Lake?
It was, the way I can describe it, it's north of, is it north of Long Lake, where the one with the pond?
Yeah, that is off of Long Lake, so it would be between Rochester and Livernois. It's on the north side, close to Somerton. It was actually a partial take because of the way Long Lake, when it was widened, had to turn around the old community pool.
Okay. So it's not it's not on Long Lake, it's back.
It's the property abuts Long Lake. It is.
Oh, okay,
does
it is.
abut Long Lake.
Okay.
Councilman Henderson?
So we spend periodically money on putting restrooms at one of the beach parks, right, and the dog park. I think we just approved some funds there. And it seems like when we need those kind of things, we can just find a place in the budget to put those kind of things. So Mark, do you feel a necessity to assess $250,000 a year on the people where we can actually just take the money out of the existing budget to accommodate essentially the same thing that we're talking about here.
At this point, we haven't analyzed it, but if you're talking about redeveloping parks, yes, we need additional revenue if we're going to build out the parks that are undeveloped. And as an example, the dog park, well, the only way we were able to develop that is because we did a partnership through a planned unit development with I forget the name.
Stonecrest.
Stonecrest. The capital, just to finish up, the capital budget would have a tough time funding the redevelopment of the parks that are totally
At
undeveloped.
the pace of $250 a year.
Yeah. Well, and the current budget, what I meant.
Right.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thank you. It's been said, but thank you. Sorry, I sound not contagious. I just sound fine. But thank you, Tim, and the committee. How many committee members are here in the audience? I thought there was. Thank you all. It's a lot of work. I know there was a lot who aren't here as well. And this report is very thorough and very helpful and gives us a lot of information. So thank you. It's a good jumping off point for us to actually dig into some of these things. I'm imagining, you said you were hemming and hawing about the millage amount. You probably wanted a lot more because 250 doesn't seem like enough to put away each year, right? For some people and for some of us, it feels like, well, we have capital funds, we have fund balance and things like that. There's always that balancing interest. I'm trying to, you were just talking about the dog park. Do you know roughly if we wouldn't have had the partnership with Stonecrest, how much it would have cost the city?
$800,000.
We only were able to develop it because of the planned development by allowing them to store or create floodplain storage on our property and then fill their property to make more developable area.
Okay. I do want to say the Silver Lake recommendation, I like how you phrased it as a wish list. I think that's a very nice way of saying, please think about these things, but you're not demanding anything. Silver Lake seems to be underutilized, and we've had people come to council and talk about it and talk about beautifying and all these things. So I think it would be a great thing to focus on that as well. And you were talking about the pocket parks and working with the community and the neighborhoods around those pocket parks if you were to develop them. Because my initial thought was, I could see some of those neighbors not wanting you to come in and develop them because for years they've had them as just undeveloped open space. So I think it would be very important to meet with all of the neighbors and to make sure, because the last thing I'd want to do is have them say, oh, the city's coming here now and ruining my park, you know. And so I don't know how that actually works in reality to try to get everyone. It's hard to get everybody to agree on the same thing, but I can see that being a potential issue that would need to be dealt with. But the community engagement aspect, as we've talked about with pretty much everything over the past few years, is so important, and that seems to be a very big one. I know there's a pocket park up right by Sanctuary Lake Golf Course. I think it's south of Burdick or one of those streets up there. And when I talked to a woman who lived there, she said, please don't ever mention it in public. We don't want people to know about it. Good job now.
Good job.
But don't watch, pretend this doesn't happen. But you know, her big concern was we don't want anyone to come in and try to buy it from the city and develop it. And we kind of like it to be our woods, our neighborhood woods that nobody bothers. So I know that would be a big issue to deal with. The millage aspect is, it's easier to say, oh, do we really need that when the economy is doing really well? And right now we think we still have a lot of fund balance money. We could use $250 for one-time capital projects for quite a while, I think. Tom's having a heart attack down there. But, it would be something to explore and to really think about and analyze the need and the necessity and how it would be used. Because I think that would be a key concern for the community. If we were to say, you can't have your 2 Starbucks a year, but we're just going to give it to, with an undefined use for it. I think that's very difficult. So something to think about. But again, thank you all for what you're putting together. It definitely gives a lot of information, so I appreciate it.
Mayor, if I may, as the staff liaison, we had a lot of conversation with bringing forward a recommendation for dedicated funds for this. And one of the things that we talked about and coached the group through is understanding what that type of what that ask is. And some of the comments back was, well, we may not need it today. However, if this would identify a priority to its citizenry, that green space is important, and regardless of the economy, we will continue to invest into our green space and with this, and that's how they came up with the 30-year recommendation as well.
Mayor? Yes. Is this online?
Yes, everything's
We
on.
can put that. You might want to look at this. These are the undeveloped. It's online, and these are the developed ones with all the pictures. And that question you have is, it's 0.7 acres, that little pocket park at Square Lake in Livernois. And it's totally, it's not utilized at all. In fact, you couldn't even sell it, 0.7 acres, nothing there. So, and there's a lot of those throughout the whole deal. And I just want to emphasize, like you said, we broke it down to 3 priorities, but in the report, there's more.
Yeah.
There's a lot more in there, but we finally said, well, you can only digest so much, so let's get the 3 major ones we felt. So.
Councilman Hamilton.
Sure. Yes, any millage like this would have to go to a vote of the people. We are already maxed out due to the charter. So all we would be doing is presenting an option to the city, and it'd be up to the people if they want to do this or not. And those bonds that are expiring in 2 years are about 0.6 mil. So this is asking for 0.05 mil. So 8% of the millage that will be dropping off anyway. And on a year-to-year basis, due to Headley rollbacks, we almost lose 0.05 mils every year anyway. I mean, as long as the housing rates keep going up. But so in essence, if barring like a housing collapse, which that doesn't happen, but we really would be just maintaining the current revenue stream. But it's up to the people, of course.
Mr. Baker, do you have another?
Yeah, when you talked about the 0.78 acres, I thought, City Attorney Bloom, are we restricted from doing certain things? I mean, does there need to be certain requirements for ADA or if we do any development, or what kind of things can be done?
Yes.
Especially on a parcel that's small,
Right.
is that one that can't, I mean, can we put a trash can and that's it, or what's the?
Yes, so some of these parcels we acquired through condemnation. So there are restrictions for what we can do with at least the money, that we got for those. And so some of them, again, there are restrictions there. Obviously, there has to be compliance with the ADA if it's, there does need to be that. And I'm sure that that's something that we would prioritize anyways to make sure that the parks were accessible to all of our citizenry.
Councilwoman Hoderick.
You were mentioning that in terms of parcels of land to be acquired, and I think our residents sometimes think that there's so much green space that if we just bought it, then it wouldn't be developed, or that it's available for purchase. What was the reality? Is there a reality to that you guys found as you were doing your studying?
No, we're pretty well land out, okay? The land that's available out there right now is owned by private hands, and they're asking big bucks, and I don't think anybody can afford it. And I'm saying, shouldn't we take care of what we have right now? We did take into consideration ADA compliance. That was all brought in there because one of the strongest things we looked at was the demographics of Troy and where it's going in the future. It's getting older, right? And there was a long time we had discussion, and I introduced the terminology. People didn't understand what passive recreation means. And passive recreation means just sitting on a park bench and reading. That's passive. You're not really outlet active. So that the recreational requirements for the city are more than just soccer fields and softball fields and basketball courts. That included walkways, bicycle lanes, and just areas where people can just sit back and repose. And part of that, when you do that, you have to consider all the ADA compliances that come with it. I mean, when you put in the facilities at the Beach Road Park, you had to consider the ADA portion of it, so.
Councilman Pennington.
That's just part of doing business. I mean, that's
Right.
that's just a reality. But the other reality that you're coming up with is it's just not realistic to go out and buy more property. We need to rework what we have, and then after we do that, we need to develop these other pocket parcels that you're talking about. There's a park near my business at Morse, is it Morse School is it Flynn Park?
It's Robinwood Park.
Robinwood, thank you. So they redid that about 20 years ago, and before they did it, I never went to that park. Actually, I would go there sometimes, lay out a blanket, take a nap or whatever. But after they redid it, I took my dog through there, and that is a wonderful park. I mean, that is fantastic what they did with the walking facilities and the way they saved all those mature trees. I mean, that is that's exactly what you're talking about. I don't know how much, I've never, I hate to admit, I've never been in this Huber Park before. And I don't know, I'm sure some employees use it. When I talk to people, there's not too many people that even know about this park.
A lot of them don't even know who Huber was.
Last week, I just drove through the parking lot, and there were 2 people cross-country skiing back there.
Oh, yeah. So that is what I'd like to see, to rethink, to redo what we have, and then after that, then develop these small pocket parcels.
You're right, and part of the development that we took into consideration was, I understand the person that says, oh, don't develop that, keep my woods that were there. Well, the problem is there's invasive species in those woods, all right? So part of the .05 also goes back to going in there and taking a real close look at these places and get rid of the invasive species and allow the real growth to grow.
Right, the hardwoods,
Yeah.
exactly. So another question I had for staff was, so I haven't been around, I've only been doing this for 6 years. He mentions money that used to be dedicated for the parks that just got absorbed in the budget, and then my other question is, how did we come up with that money? Was it?
Are you talking about bond proposals?
No,
We had a bond proposal that goes back, how many years, Kurt? That we used that money for?
Yeah, 2002-ish.
2002? Yeah.
Approximately. Yeah.
That would C?
Yeah, and we purchased land with that.
Purchase land with that.
Okay.
And those are the undeveloped parks, with the exception of the dog park.
And that one runs out when?
21.
Okay. So that's the money that I would, that's something we can use right away, and then obviously, once it's gone, you have to resubmit, like Dave's saying.
It's used. I mean, we purchased all of the properties already. So we purchased the properties way back at the start of it. So the property is used already, and now we're just financing that.
Right, so going forward, I wouldn't purchase any more property. I would
Right.
start,
Yeah.
redoing what we have, rethinking it.
Kurt, to be correct, the only park that we've developed, which we purchased with the bond money, was the dog park. Is that correct? Maybe the corner of Town Center?
Corner Town Center,
Yeah.
the dog park, and I believe Milverton Park. And that was the only parks that are actually developed to date that was purchased.
Didn't we also do the Big Beaver, Rochester, that little piece there?
Was that?
That was condemnation, probably.
That Lightsaber Park you're talking about?
Yeah.
The old gas station.
Yeah. Well, that's where everybody knows.
The most unused park in the city.
Right.
I'd like to at least keep the last 15 minutes for public comments, so if we could try to wrap up our discussion in the next 5 minutes. Councilwoman Hoderick?
I just want to, when we're talking about any parks or pocket parks, even as we already do with the trails, that we would make a commitment to our residents that they're going to be involved. They may decide may say, well, yeah, we want our woods and maybe a little, we do the maintenance, but if they want it to stay woods, we're not going to come in and clear cut and put up a play structure or something just unilaterally. It would always be with resident input as to what those areas look like, at least as long as I'm on council, and I think we're all of that mind, right?
For sure.
And I guess I just really want to say, for those who haven't read the report that was our background for the agenda tonight, it's so comprehensive in terms of its benchmarking and looking back on, the city had a great vision for all of this, and then the downturn happened in 2008, and our millage, we really work hard to just make sure we're delivering our critical services, so we are talking about something above and beyond. And I guess I just want to say, again, repeat, thank you for the comprehensive package and look. I think this is valuable to all of us and its residents and a starting point. And, you know, the team really hit it out of the park, pun intended. In what is a discussion that is going on over all the fences in town, residents and people are talking about it. So I think this is a great starting point and a great launch pad for how we can go forward to address what has been a very real concern and desire that we're hearing from our residents, and I just really appreciate it.
Thank you. I moved here in 1964, and the city fathers then had a vision. And there's an old saying, there's 2 times to plant a tree, 20 years ago and today. And I think that our city fathers before us planted those trees, because I've seen the city grow in the 45 years that I've been here, or 50 years, whatever it is. It's now whether or not we're going to plant a tree for the future generations. Liz.
Councilman Hamilton?
Thank you. And again, thanks to the whole Green Space Committee was a volunteer committee, which is incredible. The amount of hours you all contributed to this is fantastic. So you mentioned that another municipality had the goal of a 1/4-mile walk to any park. Was any part of this report kind of evaluate how many households within Troy are within a 1/4 mile of a...
We looked at it, and actually in the report, our recommendation is a 1/2 mile.
1/2 mile.
Yeah. I think the guideline, isn't it, from the national, is a 1/2 mile, or is it a mile?
No,
I think it's a 1/2 mile.
It's within 1 square mile.
One
which
square,
was
yeah,
part
within
of
1
our
square mile.
Parks and
Okay.
Recreation Master Plan goal was to have a park in every square mile.
Did we do a metric of how many, roughly, very roughly, how many Troy residents are within those various guidelines?
Yeah, when we took a look at the population of 81,000 and the demographics of that population, it all came underneath consideration. What was really interesting is that we actually, for the first time that I know of, we went out and actually talked to every surrounding city, Troy, to their Parks and Recreation or their planning people. And it was really interesting to see what they have on the books and what they don't have on the books. So.
Okay, just a couple of thoughts from me. There's been some excellent comments that don't need to be repeated, but this is another example for me is the city council needs to prioritize how we're going to spend our money and how we're going to spend our money in the next 3 years. When we look at our 3-year budget coming up this year, to take a look at, we're going to do a survey, and I think we need to get that survey done sooner than later so that we can see what the residents are thinking and what their priorities are. And I'm kind of convinced the trails and pathways are going to be back up at the top. And that's one of the things that I'm hearing tonight also is this connectivity between parks and between nodes and between schools. And in my opinion, it has to be a top priority with us. We had $3 million set aside and had to use that during the recession. We need to get going on that and make that a serious priority to get these parks connected, to make sure that the neighborhoods can get to a pathway that can take them to a park and be connected. Our only trail and pathway across the street is a perfect example of what I've heard tonight about being able to sit on a park bench and look at a beautiful piece of property, and that's just what I think we need to really focus. We can talk about what to do with the bonds, maybe next year. And this council is going to have a big decision to make in the next 2 years. With the library millage coming due in 2020, these are going to expire in 21. So I think next year this council is really going to have to make some tough decisions on what your priorities are going to be. And is the 7-day library very important? That could be extra millage. There's a lot of things that need to be thought of, but I want to see what this survey has to say myself. And just in closing, from my thoughts, I really don't want to get lost here. What a great job our Parks and Recreation Department does with our parks today, with what we give them, the funding that we give them, the people that we give them. Those parks are really maintained and nice with what we give them. And maybe we should look at expanding that in the short term. I like the idea of Sylvan Lake. I think that's a great idea, but I'm not sure that we can accomplish something like that on our own. You know, Mr. Miller?
Really quick, Mayor and Council, we anticipate sending to Council the assigning of the contract for the survey services at the next meeting a week from tonight, and also to schedule a study meeting to work with the pollster on deciding what the topics are to be included in the survey.
Yeah, I think that's going to just be important to all of us to get some input.
Yeah.
You know, we always talk about input from citizenry. This is, to me, the best way, but I want to make sure our businesses are also included in a survey too, because they're important to our community also. So having said that, we can continue this discussion in council comments this evening if some other thoughts come up, but I'd like to take this opportunity to let some residents speak. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. We do have a timer, and we would like to get through this by 7 o'clock. If you have not given me a card, please come up and fill your name in the card here, and I'll call your name. Please come to the microphone, give us your name, and please try and make it quick within 3 minutes. So first I'll call on Mylan Chonich.
Yes, thank you.
Troy resident.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm a 40-year resident of Troy. I live on Glasgow Drive in Sylvan Glen 3, which abuts up to the golf course and the Sylvan Glen Lake Park. You have our full support in terms of anything you wish to do in terms of developing that particular park, because I think it is a jewel that has been left unattended. One of the reasons that I moved to Troy with my family was that the master plan, we reviewed the master plan of Troy back in 1978, and we were very impressed with the character of the city. I'm here not to support any particular aspect of this particular plan, but I'm here to remind you that the character of the city has attracted a great number of people that are still here for quite a long time. And I'd like you to maintain that character of the city so that it is attractive to people. And it does have a lot to do with density and with green spaces. And we'd like to see a progressive approach to utilizing the lands that are available. You'll have the full support of the people in Sylvan Glen, I think, in terms of anything that you wish to do with the park. I appreciate you having this as part of your recommendation in terms of the subcommittee report, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Ida Edmonds. I don't have to tell everybody that she's a Troy resident. Good evening, Ida.
I have had privilege of being a part of this committee, and Dr. Fowler and I were the members who toured or investigated all of the undeveloped parks. And I wanted to tell you personally that we have some beautiful pieces of property. Even undeveloped as they are, they're lovely. They're over 61, I think Kurt said over 61 and a half acres of undeveloped park, 11 parcels. The two largest are a little over 14 acres, and there's some of them are less than an acre. So there's capabilities for all sorts of things in many of them. They're mowed and maintained over the summer, and some of them are very wooded and dense. It costs taxpayer dollars to care for these pieces of property. So I think one of the reasons that we supported or talked about a millage was that perhaps before the community is frequently saying we need more green space, preserve green space, that maybe we should be developing some of this green space or doing something of worth to the community before we talk about purchasing any additional green space. So I just wanted to reassure you that we do have beautiful property that we own, in addition to very fine parks. Somebody else did review of the parks, and they did a fine job. They determined that you do a fine job of maintaining the parks with a lot of amenities. The second point, well, that was the point that I wanted to make about the millage. I also wanted to say that the property that's available in Troy now is very expensive. So expensive that I don't think taxpayers would be inclined to want to use taxpayer dollars to purchase any of that property. Developers pay a lot of money for that, and I know you hear about all of the rights that developers had to develop. So it's too bad that there's not some way we can incentivize these developers to maintain some of the green space so that we can still have additional. Wait, I think we do that. Don't we have a cluster development option? That's this administration's answer to the need for additional green space. Let's incentivize the developers to provide a park, perhaps a little park or some additional trees and some green space. I think that the community, if they truly understood what the cluster development is, would be fully in support of it. And I've heard you do really nice jobs. Councilwoman Hoderack, I've heard you explain from your board seat frequently very good explanations of the value of the cluster development. Not enough people watch the meetings, or they're not understanding. I think you need to get some positive information out into the community about what the cluster development in fact does and how it benefits all of us, not just the developer. So I thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee. It was very well done. Administration was wonderful in providing us with everything we needed to know. And I hope that the community will get some benefit from what was determined.
Thank you, Ida. Next, I'll call on Tina Catron, Troy resident.
Wow, I am late to this party. This is amazing, everybody. My name is Tina, and I work with the Stage Nature Center here in Troy. I also live across the street from Section 1, which is one of the properties that was owned by the Troy School District, which very recently we were able to bring the community together. I was so glad when we were talking about these pocket parks, and I'll get to that in a minute. And 77 acres of that property is actually going to be permanently conserved. Thank goodness. Kudos to so many people at the city and in the council and the Troy School Board for making that happen. I would have loved to be part of the subcommittee. Like I said, I'm late to this party. That would have been amazing. But I just want to say this is a really good step in the right direction. As Ida said, there's a lot of people blaming the city, blaming pretty much anybody who they can for the loss of green space in Troy. And at the Nature Center, we hear almost on a daily basis people complaining, green space is disappearing in Troy. Green space is disappearing. What are we going to do about this? What is anyone doing about it? Why is the city just giving away all the land? And educating people and getting that message out there of what's actually happening, and subcommittees like this that are working really hard to make sure that we're going in the right direction with conserving all of this and making some of this undeveloped land more usable by the community. I think that's really important. So I hope that we continue with that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the cards that I was given for those that want to speak. Okay.
And a late arrival.
Sure. It's me, and I'm over here, so.
Sure. Terry McCormick?
20-plus year resident, parent, Troy teacher, recently retired environmental activist. So I love everything that you're talking about, particularly the interconnectedness of the parks. That's a great focus. The thing that set off a red flag for me was point 3 up there about Sylvan Lake. With its proximity.
Move up to the microphone. Thank you. We're recording this.
Okay. Sylvan Lake's proximity to the golf course is a bit of a concern. I don't know. I'm sure there's been some studies and some thought put into this, but I don't see it in this report. The fertilizer and pesticide runoff into Sylvan Lake, to me, excludes it as possible fishing and swimming area. Unless there is some longitudinal data that exists that has already been studied, or you have a plan moving forward to get that data, that to me would be a little iffy, to say the least. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Next I'll call on Frank Howerlick, Troy resident. Good evening, Frank.
I just would like to ask, could you elaborate on the Civic Center? You had mentioned it just briefly, what the committee was addressing there.
This is an opportunity for public comment. It's really not an interaction with the table, but
okay,
we'll see if we can get some information.
Okay, I just say, I think it's just a wonderful job, and I think you put a lot of effort into this. There's no way I could have put in that much effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in public comment for this study session? Please come forward, and you can just give your name. Aaron, you can just give us your name.
Or we'll give it to you.
Hi, my name is Aaron Green, and again, I'd just join everybody else in saying what a great job your committee has done. The report is excellent. The report given was excellent. The plans, a lot of them sound truly excellent, and of course they need review for actual incorporation, but thank you for the work. I do have some concerns about some of the options that were mentioned more by council. The idea of using fund balance for this on at least an ongoing basis, to me that sounds unsustainable, because the nature of the fund balance is that at some point that will run dry, whereas these parks, hopefully, the idea is that we can maintain them and grow them essentially forever. So in order to do that, I would think that we need to let the citizens engage with that. And while historically it's been a bit difficult to bring enough of the citizens on board, I think that this is something that they do deeply care about, that we do deeply care about, and that I know I, for one, would be willing to put my tax dollars towards. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak this evening? Okay, I think it was a great conversation. Some of the points that were up there can be elaborated at a future date regarding each one of those, but it's a great start to a budget discussion that we're going to have in the coming next months. So thanks everyone for coming. As always, if you have anything else, you can email staff or email city council or speak with any council member for any input. So we are adjourned. I'll see you at 7:30.